So what exactly is a jellyfish? The answer is a bit more complicated than you might expect. The creatures we call jellyfish are actually the medusa phase of gelatinous animals belonging to the subphylum Medusazoa, which itself sits within the larger phylum called Cnidaria. Think of medusa as a particular body, form, an umbrella-shaped bell with trailing tentacles, rather than a specific animal. It is a phase in a life cycle, not the whole story within this group. There is an important distinction to make when scientists talk about true jellyfish. They are referring specifically to the scyphozoans. There are roughly 200 described species in this category, and they represent what most of us picture when we hear the word jellyfish, but there are other groups too, the cubozoans, often called box. Jellies comprise about 20 species, known for their cube-shaped bells and remarkably complex eyes. Then, there are the hydrozoans, a diverse group that includes everything from tiny, nearly invisible jellies to the infamous Portuguese man-of-war, though that particular animal is actually a colony of specialized individuals working together, rather than a single organism. The naming itself has become surprisingly contentious. The word jellyfish has been around since 1796, and it remains the most widely recognized term. But in recent decades, public aquariums have pushed for the phrase sea jellies. Instead, their reasoning is straightforward enough: these animals are not fish, and using the word fish suggests they have backbones, which they certainly do not. Of course, we do the same thing with starfish and cuttlefish without much complaint. So the debate continues. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about jellyfish is just how long they have been around. These animals have been swimming in Earth's oceans for at least 500 million years. Some evidence suggests they may stretch back as far as 700 million years. That makes them the oldest multi-organ animal group on the entire planet. They were here long before the dinosaurs, before fish with skeletons, before almost everything we might recognize in the animal kingdom today. When you look at a jellyfish, you are looking at an ancient survivor. When you look at a jellyfish floating through the water, you are essentially looking at a living balloon. Their bodies are roughly 95% water, which is an extraordinary figure when you consider that most animals are packed with dense tissues and complex organs. But jellyfish operate on a completely different principle. Their body structure consists of just 3 layers. The outer layer is called the epidermis, and it serves as their skin and primary interface with the surrounding world. The innermost layer is the gastrodermis, which lines their digestive cavity. Sandwiched between these 2 thin cellular sheets is the mesoglia, a transparent gelatinous substance that makes up the vast bulk of the animal. This jelly-like material gives the creature both its name and its distinctive appearance. What makes this anatomy truly remarkable is not what is present, but what is absent. Jellyfish have no brain to process information, no heart to pump blood, no blood itself to transport nutrients, no bones to provide structure, and no lungs or gills to extract oxygen from water. Yet they manage to survive and thrive in oceans around the world. Instead of a centralized brain, they rely on something called a nerve net, which is a decentralized web of nerves spread throughout their body. This network can detect light, touch, and chemical signals in the water, allowing the jellyfish to respond to its environment without any command center. Their radial symmetry means the same structures are arranged around a central axis, giving them a full 360-degree view of their surroundings. They do not need to turn their head to see what is behind them, because every direction is equally accessible. The bell-shaped body contracts in a rhythmic pulsing motion, creating a simple but effective form of jet propulsion that pushes water behind them and moves them forward. At the center of the bell hangs the manubrium, a tube-like structure surrounded by oral arms. This arrangement serves as both the entrance and exit for food and waste. The single opening leads to a gastric cavity called the coelenterine, which functions as stomach and intestine combined. It is a system that could not be more stripped down, yet it has worked perfectly for hundreds of millions of years. The life cycle of a jellyfish is surprisingly complex, involving two distinct phases that could not be more different from each other. When we see adult jellyfish floating through the water, we are looking at the medusa stage, and these are the ones that reproduce sexually. The adults are either male or female, and they release eggs and sperm into the water where fertilization takes place. From this union comes something unexpected. A tiny ciliated larva called a planula emerges and drifts through the water, sometimes for days or weeks before settling down when it finds a suitable surface. Perhaps a rock or a piece of shell. It attaches itself and transforms into something that looks nothing like a jellyfish at all. This is the polyp stage, technically called a scyphostoma, and it resembles a small sea anemone. More than anything else, here is where things get really interesting. The polyp does not just wait around, it can reproduce asexually by budding, creating clones of itself, and essentially building a small colony. When conditions are right, something remarkable happens. The polyp starts producing tiny immature jellyfish called ephyrae, which break free and drift away to grow into the adult medusae we recognize. So a single polyp can give rise to many jellyfish, multiplying its genetic legacy far beyond what simple reproduction would allow. There's also a curious twist with sex in some species. While most adults are distinctly male or female, certain species have individuals that change sex as they age, a flexibility that probably helps ensure reproductive success in varying conditions. The lifespan difference between these two phases is striking. The medusae we see pulsing through the water typically live only a few weeks or months, just long enough to grow, reproduce, and complete their cycle. But the polyp stage, hidden on the seafloor, can persist for much longer, sometimes for years, patiently waiting and producing generation after generation of drifting medusae. It is a bit like having two completely different animals sharing the same life story. The tentacles trailing beneath a jellyfish are not just decorative streamers drifting in the current, they are sophisticated hunting weapons, each one bristling with thousands of specialized cells called nematocysts. These stinging cells are among the most remarkable microscopic structures in the animal kingdom. When a jellyfish drifts through the water, its tentacles sweep through the surrounding space like a living net. The nematocysts lining these tentacles remain coiled and ready, waiting for the right trigger. They respond to both touch and chemical signals, which means a jellyfish can detect potential prey before actual contact occurs. The moment something brushes against a tentacle, the response is almost instantaneous. Each nematocyst fires with remarkable speed, launching a tiny harpoon-like thread that injects toxin into the target. This happens faster than the human eye can track the venom, acts quickly paralyzing small prey within seconds. Once the prey is immobilized, the jellyfish uses its oral arms, those frilly structures surrounding the mouth on the underside of the bell, to guide the captured food inward for consumption. The typical jellyfish diet consists of small creatures that share their watery environment. Copepods, those tiny crustaceans that form the backbone of many marine food webs, are a common meal. Fish larvae and other small zooplankton also end up on the menu. The specific prey varies depending on the jellyfish species. and what is available in their particular habitat. Not all jellyfish rely on stinging tentacles to feed. Some species operate as suspension feeders, simply filtering tiny organisms and phytoplankton directly from the water column as it passes through their bodies. This gentler approach works well for certain environments where prey is abundant, but too small to require active capture. Interestingly, while most jellyfish species are armed with potent tentacles, nature always has exceptions. Tiburonia granrojo, sometimes called the big red jellyfish, is one of only 3 known jellyfish species that lacks tentacles entirely. This deep-sea dweller gets by without the stinging arsenal that defines most of its relatives, demonstrating that there is more than one way to survive as a drifter in the open ocean. Jellyfish are found throughout the world's oceans, from sunlit surface waters down to the darkest depths of the deep sea. The true jellyfish, known as scyphozoans, are exclusively marine creatures, never venturing into brackish or freshwater environments. However, some of their relatives in the group called hydrozoans have managed to colonize freshwater lakes and rivers, expanding the jellyfish presence beyond the boundaries of the sea. Among the major groups of scyphozoans, the order Semiostomi represents perhaps the most familiar face of jellyfish to most people. This group includes roughly 50 species that tend to inhabit coastal waters, and many have remarkably wide geographic ranges. The moon jellyfish Aurelia and the sea nettles of the genus Chrysaora belong here. If you have ever seen a jellyfish at an aquarium or washed up on a beach, it was likely one of these. Go deeper into the ocean, and you encounter a different group entirely. The coronetti or crown jellyfish comprise about 30 species that make their homes in the deep sea. These creatures often display a rich maroon coloration, and they are considered the most primitive of living scyphozoans, offering a glimpse into the ancient origins of this group. A distinctive circular groove separates the central bell from the outer region, giving them their crowned appearance. The Rhizostomi represent another major order with around 80 species, but not all jellyfish drift freely through the water. The Storumjusi have abandoned the swimming life entirely. These sessile creatures attach themselves by stalks to seaweed and other surfaces, remaining fixed in place rather than pulsing through the currents. When conditions turn favorable, jellyfish populations can explode into vast swarms. These gatherings become more than just a natural spectacle. They can fill fishing nets and make them nearly impossible to haul in. Even more problematically, such swarms have been known to clog the cooling systems of coastal power plants that draw seawater, causing significant disruptions for human infrastructure along the coast. Our relationship with jellyfish stretches in several directions at once, and perhaps the most surprising one is on the dinner plate. In several Asian countries, jellyfish have been consumed for centuries, and they are actually considered a delicacy. The preparation process is quite involved. Species from the Rhizostomi order are pressed and salted to draw out the excess water, resulting in a crunchy texture that appeals to many diners. Australian researchers have gone so far as to describe jellyfish as a perfect food. They point out that jellyfish are sustainable to harvest and rich in protein, while being relatively low in calories, which makes them an intriguing option in a world increasingly concerned about food security. On a completely different front, jellyfish have become indispensable to modern science. Certain bioluminescent species produce something called green fluorescent protein, and this single molecule has revolutionized laboratory work. Scientists have adapted it as a fluorescent reporter, essentially a glowing marker that shows them where specific genes are active inside cells. The impact on fluorescence microscopy has been enormous, allowing researchers to watch biological processes unfold in real time. It is remarkable to think that a protein evolved by a drifting ocean creature has become one of the most important tools in genetics research. Of course, most people encounter jellyfish in a far less pleasant context. Those stinging cells that jellyfish use to capture prey can also injure humans, and they do so with surprising frequency. Thousands of swimmers are stung every year in waters around the world. For most people, the experience means mild discomfort, perhaps some redness and irritation that fades after a few hours. But the effects can be far more serious. Some stings cause significant injury, and in rare cases they can even lead to death. The box jellyfish deserve special mention. Here, these creatures are particularly dangerous to humans, and encounters with certain species require urgent medical attention. What makes this especially troubling is how difficult it can be to spot these animals in the water before it is too late.